welcome to another episode of SpecTalk. Today, we've got a very special guest today that I'm really excited to introduce you guys to. But before we get started, we're obviously going to do a little bit of housekeeping and intro things today. So, can you guys see my screen? Okay, the shared screen.
I'm not seeing
Anybody?
it.
Not yet.
No. All right. Let me move that over here maybe and try that again. How about now?
Nope.
No, still not seeing my screen. Okay. All right. We're having the tiniest little bit of. Hold on. Okay, I got it now. Here we go. Share, and I will.
There we go.
That's
There we go.
looking good.
Now we
Yeah.
now we can see it. All right. I'm all thrown off because we got off to an early start. So with us always today is Alex Bear, myself, Dory, Azar, and we have a special kind of co-guest today. Jason Hicks is joining us today, our Canadian professional content manager here at RIB Software. And our guest today is David Graham, and we're going to get to a proper introduction of David in just a second, right after we take care of some housekeeping issues. As always, every week you're invited to submit a project for our specified in SpecLink contest. So if you've got a project that you've used SpecLink for and would like to submit it for a prize, we'd love to feature you, your firm, and your project on an upcoming Spec Talk. You can see we're giving out JLB speakers and some other RIB swag to go along with that. So take a look and please consider submitting your project. The winner for this week is Jim McDonald, Senior Professional Architect from Kleinfelder. And the project that we are featuring here are the Victoria Vista Senior Apartments in Cincinnati, Ohio, 50-unit senior apartment building, wood frame, 4-story structure. So it's interesting to see. It's a good-looking project, and interesting to see all the taller wood frame buildings that are coming along. Now, about today's episode. Today's episode is going to be the Spec Effect, quality, function, and contract hierarchy. I'll just read a quick summary here, and then we'll get rolling. Specifications are the backbone of quality control in any construction project. They define the materials, standards, and execution required to meet the design intent. In today's discussion, we'll start with a refresher on why specifications exist and their critical role in a project. We'll then compare specifications to other structured documents, like a recipe, to illustrate their format and function. And finally, we'll explore how specifications fit into the contract hierarchy and what happens when conflicts arise between specs, drawings, and other documents. So today's guest is, I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a sec too. Just the suspense. I just getting so close to introducing David. Today's special guest is David Graham from Deepgram Architecture. David has been a registered architect for 34 years, mostly in the province of British Columbia. His project experience includes hospitals, universities, schools, colleges, and government projects, government buildings, class AAA office buildings, retail, commercial, residential, low-rise and high-rise, restaurants, automotive dealerships, retail, and banks. So I think David's pretty much done it all. So we're going to expect that experience to come through today. For the past 16 years, David's architectural practice has specialized in solely writing specifications for other architects as a specifications consultant. More recently, he has been helping firms develop their own master specifications using SpecLink Cloud. Well, there's a segue. David purchased a license for SpecLink about 10 years ago and has used the platform continuously ever since. David has also taught the principles of construction documentation and construction contract administration courses in the CSC education program, and is currently immediate past president of Construction Specifications Canada. And one final note, and this is a really impressive stat here. One of David's most recent projects was a specification that he wrote for a $2.4 billion St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver that he worked on continuously for 2.5 years. So everybody, we've got a good one today. Welcome, David, to the show. David, awesome to have you here. I can't wait to start picking that brain of yours and let everybody hear all about your experiences.
I'm so glad to be here.
Excellent. Let's start out with a couple of questions. I just want to remind the viewers that the Q&A is open. We've already got a few questions coming in here. Also, the materials section is open already if you want to sign up for future Spec Talks and whatnot. But let's get started with some questions. And if you have any questions for David that are popping up in your head, please let us know. But David, so first question, in your career, which we has been vast, you went from outsourcing your specs to writing your own specs in a word processor to writing them in SpecLink, and now you're helping new people, new firms write their own specs in SpecLink. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, some of the kind of wins and losses that happen over that time, and what common themes you experience when people are trying to get into bringing their spec writing in-house?
Sure. Well, really, it sort of came down to when I was working in Edmonton for a firm, and I was doing a lot of contract administration, and I wanted to get the spec just right for my style of contract administration. So part one of the spec was really developed by me to make sure that I didn't have too many samples, too many shop drawings, and I was able to sort of control that through um, certainly part one of the spec and parts of part three. So that's really what drew me to writing specifications in the first place. So I took a course through Construction Specifications Canada, and then I went on to take the specifier course from one of our leading specifiers in the country, Keith Robinson. So that really sort of piqued my interest in doing specifications, and I started writing more and more specifications at the time. And of course, it was in Word. And I got to the point where I was writing a lot of specifications in Word and found that, especially if people wanted to make changes, clients wanted to make changes, that you'd have to go back through a specification.
Hmm.
You could use the reviewing mode in Word as much as you possibly could, but however, it really started to get complicated. So then I met Alex at a conference and got the whole idea of this more automated way of writing specifications. So I already had masters developed in my bank of masters in Word.
Hmm.
So I took those forward and put them into what was the first sort of SpecLink product that came out was SpecLink E.
Hmm.
And that really helped me create much more simple specifications to begin with. But the key thing for me was to not lose any information. Whereas in a word system, you tend to lose information. You have to try and backtrack, and it doesn't work very well. Whereas with SpecLink E at the time, and now C is way better, I found that that information could stay in the spec, even though, of course, the client doesn't see it at the end of the day. All that information, those notes to yourself about the project and so forth, could be retained within that system. And that was very helpful and way faster than doing it in Word. So then I eventually progressed to using SpecLink C. Um, and of course, using all their internal links and their ability to turn things off and turn things on, their ability to collaborate with other people, to collaborate with your client, so they could see the comments and you could ask them
Hmm.
comments directly online. Help really speed up the process instead of sending a PDF document to your client and having it come back, and now you had to fill all that information in and change things around. Then you'd have to send another one out. This
Hmm.
way, it was a little bit more live in your
Right.
response. And of course, I've used Bluebeam as well with clients to work through some more challenging aspects of their project. Um, but the spec link really made a difference to me in terms of how fast I could go, all the information that could be stored in the system or in that spec document, that could basically be forever retained if you develop your master um, to do that. So I found that working through a spec, um, I would have the spec for the client open at the same time I would have the master open. So if a new thing came up that needed to go into the specification, I could decide then right away if it was worthwhile taking that information and putting it into the master and then keeping it in that master.
Oh.
So I was building my master every time I did a project, and I still do that. I still keep working away uh, on these specifications and the master at the same time. So I'm continuously building up my
And
resource
you're doing
pool, if you
that.
will.
I'm sorry, David, you're doing that in real time. So you're not making a list of, okay, well, later, every other Friday, I'm going to go
No,
back through this list and update you're like in the
no,
moment. If you kind of wrote a useful spec for a
yeah,
project, it's immediately coming over to the master.
it is.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
of course I'll have comments to myself in that, but I also use the note tool on the left hand side,
Hmm.
which I'll add notes to about, for this project we use this material and make sure you don't stick this in the wrong place, and notes to myself really as to how to keep the spec going actively, but also concisely. So I had all that information in front of me in one place, and I could even put uh, links, HTTP or web links into the notes, which helped me get back to the the spec or the company's websites faster, and copy information directly from that and put it into the notes. So you're continuously building up this wealth of information
Hmm.
that's readily available, without having to sort of go out and then come back into the system. It's very active and very smooth for me.
So when you're meeting some firms that are just getting into either, like, it's kind of a parallel question here, when they're just getting into either bringing their specs in house, or if they are in house, if they're jumping over to SpecLink, what is the um, sort of the advice, or the first kind of few things you ask them about, or that you notice right away about their specs, to help them make it a successful process to either bring them in house, or convert to SpecLink?
Yeah, there's different approaches. One approach is to they've purchased the spec link, and they come to me and say, okay, we purchased this software, we want to learn how to use it, and we want to build it that to a system that meets our own company's needs. And every company sort of does their drawings in different ways. A lot of projects will use, or clients will use tags for various materials throughout the specification. When I was doing the hospital, that was very, very key to obviously using a pretty large spec, but also for everyone in sort of down from there, and laterally understanding the spec at the same time and coordinating it with the drawings. So every firm is going to be slightly different. So that's kind of the first thing I go through, is to understand. They'll show me the drawings, and I'll make some suggestions as to how to keep the language similar between specs and
Hmm.
drawings. And every company is slightly different. Um, they'll use self-adhering membrane, SAM. Some don't use that. They use a weather barrier or a vapor weather
Hmm.
barrier. That kind of language can easily be adopted into part one of the spec, where it says section includes. So you can refine your specification to meet the needs of the client right there, and that helps the whole team understand better how the spec integrates with the drawings.
Okay.
So that would be the first thing. The next thing would be to get them to understand that not everything in the specification master that comes from SLC is going to be used by them. So what we look through, because it's very broad, it has a lot of information. So the key is to help refine that information down to a point where they're comfortable understanding the materials and how they are going to use them in the document, in the specification. So that's key as well, is helping them go through that. There's so many choices to make, and that can sometimes be overwhelming. Well, what I do is I reduce that overwhelm by saying, okay, we're only going to stick to these materials because this is mostly what you do on your projects. And that's really helpful for them, because the first look at it, they go, wow. In terms of taking their master and moving it into SLC, um, really what I focus on is the products, materials is the big one. We look at that first, and we go through the materials and decide which ones they need to have, that coming from, say, their spec is in Word or whatever, and move it into SLC. That's the first place to start, is part two. The next place to start is part one. How do you want to do contract administration? How can we help you deliver what you need to get to the contractors and the clients, the owners, and so forth, to get a better way of doing contract administration, so it doesn't take up so much time.
Mhm.
That's really clearly spelled out in our submittals portion of part one. That gives them a very good idea of how they can read that and know what effect it's going to have in their contract administration. So I'll go through part one with them, especially that component, and fine tune the part one of SLC. What doesn't work all that well is taking a spec section, and converting it from Word straight into SLC. Um, because I think they miss a lot of the links that have already been set up in SLC. They lose a lot of the components that SLC has to offer. Um, Although it can be useful in some sections where it's very, very unique construction system that they want to put in, it's better to start with SLC, because of all those components that are already embedded in that master, as opposed to sort of writing over it, if you will, or creating
Mhm.
something entirely new. Like I said, sometimes it works on a product that is very, very unique. But most of the time, I would encourage people to stick with SLC. If you've got something in Word that you want to move to SLC, then really stick with part two first, and then part one, and really part three. It's all there anyway, and I find a lot of specs from clients would be overkill for part three, and it doesn't need to be,
Oh.
because we have so many reference standards that are useful in understanding, um, or telling a contractor what is important. If you have a unique sequence or something like that, then you would put that into part three. Otherwise, part three really is very well set up.
It's interesting to hear you talk through that, David, because when we're doing a demo or working with people new to SpecLink, or getting them through the adoption phase, that we do tell them to start in part two. That's the way we design the linking, the framework for
Yes,
the linking. So it's kind of intuitive for a spec writer to start there, and I think the linking builds off that spec writer's intuition. Start in part two, and we automatically populate some of your sequences in part one and three.
hmm
The other thing I found was interesting when you were saying people importing sections. That's a great tool for people that need to use it for that specialty section or scope of work that you're doing as part of the work result. But generally, we do tell people, if you're building out your own office master specification, start with the framework of sections that we've provided you as part of your
Mhm.
content subscription. Start there, because you get the benefit of a team behind the scenes updating those master
yeah,
specs. Plus,
yeah,
you don't lose all the linking. Even the simplest linking is something that helps you with your own in-house efficiency. So yeah,
right.
if you can start with ours, start with the RIB Canada or the RIB US content for your masters.
So that leads me to a question that came in. Ron is asking, and maybe it's a simple question, but maybe not. The question is, how does your master stay updated? How does your master stay updated with regard to code references, for example?
Plus, SpecLink, see, especially Jason was probably in charge of most of that, goes through those, and where the codes have changed. In BC, for example, we're now up to 2024. Those pretty much happen very quickly with SpecLink. Jason's really on top of that, so I appreciate that. Um, so that's one thing there. If you're using an older code, you can simply change that too. It's not challenging. Now, the other thing to remember is a code is not always embedded into a specification section. There's certain aspects like handrails and guardrails and things like that where the code is important. The provincial code that you're using is important. But when it comes to gypsum board, the code plays really no part in that, other than um, it's it's how the assemblies are set up. But that comes from the drawings. It's not necessarily in the specification.
All right, let's. There's a few more questions coming in here, so I want to make sure that we get to everybody's question today. Next one is: Do you find you copy and paste the information back to your masters while you're in projects, or do you push the entire project spec over to your master when you're finished with that section to then be the new master? What's your process on that?
I if I'm working with some more unique situations in a specification that the client needs to have for a project, I'll have my master and then I'll copy and paste.
So it is a copy paste then,
Yeah.
the route that you're taking. Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it probably gives you more control to overwrite what becomes part of the master.
It does, and quite frankly, I can't remember everything when a project is done of why decisions were made necessarily. So it's really nice to have if you're able to do that sort of live or simultaneously, um, it, you can free up your brain for other information to work on.
Sure.
All right. I think I'm going to take a quick second here while I review a couple more questions. And I just want to ask the group a quick poll question here. So just really quick on the screen, guys. I'd be curious to know with today's audience, are you a current SpecLink subscriber? So the options today are yes, no, or yes, but my consultants are not. And then we will just go around to each consultant and shake our fist at them and make sure that we get them up on board using SpecLink so that your projects are going better and we're not, we just want everybody happy. I see a couple of hands raised, guys. Rob and Mark, if you just want to drop your questions in the comments or in the Q&A, I'll definitely be sure to get to those. So we're looking at about a little over 70% of us are SpecLink users. 10% are not, and almost 20% yes, but consultants are not. So we will have a word with your consultants. No, I'm just kidding. Well, maybe we will. I don't know if they're interested in signing up. We'll definitely have a chat with them. Absolutely, and there are the results there. How that's all shaping up. So I love the active audience today. These are good. This is almost everyone. We're close to 200 people on today. So this is excellent. Another question that came in is: would you recommend copying? End quote. Would you recommend copying the master RIB section if you're looking to add company-specific needs, like specific manufacturers?
Not sure I understand the question.
The way I read the question is if you're looking to
Okay.
create a custom section, would
Yeah.
you, and whoever posted this, asked this question, feel free to clarify,
Yeah.
would you modify an existing section to meet the needs of a new section that you want to create, or would you kind of create one from scratch,
Okay.
or
All right.
what would that's how I'm
I
reading
get
it.
that. I do that a lot actually. I'll take a spec section and copy it, change the name and the number, because it might be quite similar with respect to many of the things that SpecLink already has. When you get into the finishes, that's huge, because architects like their finishes, interior designers like their finishes, and really there's all kinds of stuff out there that will go into a project. Um, when I was doing a project for a recreation center, the number of acoustic treatment um, products couldn't all really fit into a spec link section. So what I did is I copied that and changed it to meet the needs of that particular manufacturer's products. Um, and that works great. That works really well.
Okay. So for today's episode, also, David, I know we had some key discussion points that we wanted to get to
Mhm.
that I think you're really going to provide a lot of value for the audience. So the discussion points today were about the project's ultimate quality. The One of the things I'm really curious about is comparing it to a recipe and how you would explain that, and then where the specs stand in relation to the drawings and other contract documents. So why don't we start with the first discussion point?
Right.
Let's talk about the understanding specifications as the project's ultimate quality document.
So if I'll start off with giving you an example of why we really need specification. And it benefits the contractors, the general contractors, as well as the owner. If something isn't done correctly on the project, where do you go to point out to that subtrade or whatever the case may be that they didn't do it correctly? So it's the ultimate document for quality control. We have a whole gamut of ASCM standards that point to how things are built, what quality they need to be, and basically sets a standard across the industry to meet. So that's the first thing. It really is important to have those things in the specification because there is no other place where we describe that quality. And it's always something that you can go back to and point out and say, well, this is what you signed a contract for, and you didn't deliver this part of that. So you have a document, a contract document to point back to. So that's the first thing. It is a contract, and in order to set those rules, if you will, guidelines, it's really important that we have a document that describes that because the drawings don't, right? The drawings tell you how big things are, where they go, where the window is, and so forth. But when it comes down to the quality of the installation, the quality of the product, those are embedded in the specification. So without something like that, you have nothing to fall back onto to enforce that quality of work that you're expecting to get because you signed a contract.
Excellent. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward concept, right? If we wrote it and you agreed to it, you should do it. The next key point that we wanted to get to today was you said you were going to illustrate for us a three-part structure, like a recipe. And yeah, I see a little smirk coming up on your face. So do I
Yeah.
get like to pick the recipe, or are you going to come up with? Because I have some favorite foods that I'd love for you to build a spec around. But if you want to,
Well,
yeah, maybe I'll let you do it your
yeah.
way because I'm sure
Well,
you have something in mind.
in the courses we teach, it's pretty common. We use the hamburger as a write a spec about a hamburger, right?
Hmm.
And really, it's a recipe. So even if it's a cake or whatever, there's three parts to it. There's really all, the general description of what you're trying to get to, like what the end game is, right? Um, and then in part two is all the materials that you need, you know, flour and butter and salt and sugar and all those wonderful things. In part three, it describes to you how to mix those things together, possibly in what sequence, what temperature to cook it at, and so forth. And what I see in a lot of specifications is that they try and say in part two what really should be said in part three. So if you stick to that principle, that rule, all the way through your specifications, you get much cleaner specification. And try not to mix things up because it really is an industry standard across our two nations, and elsewhere, of course. But the ones I'm most familiar with is Canada and the USA. So if you stick to that principle every time you write something that is unique to the specification that you brought in, try and remember that the information on where it goes, how it's assembled, who assembles it, and so forth is always in part three. Part two is nothing but products. It just lists the products, period. It also tells you of course, who manufactures, which is you don't very often see in a cooking recipe, but it's the same principle.
I would love to be a part of that class that teaches. I would love to see you stand at the front of a classroom or a virtual classroom and
It,
and you'd probably make me hungry at that point too, right? Like
well,
we'd have to take a break immediately after that section
I
and go
know.
for a barbecue or something.
Well, they get to design their own burger, whether it has a particular kind of cheese, what quality of that cheese goes in it, and so forth. It's fun.
Change orders.
Yeah.
Do I get fries too, or is it no? Well, never mind. I'm a big fry guy, so let's pass on that. And then the final discussion point, and then we're really going to dive into viewers' questions, was
Okay.
where specs stand in relation to drawings and other contract documents, and how conflicts are resolved. So I know it's conflicts happen. We all do our best, but
Yeah.
things just happen, right? So what's
Okay.
your experience on conflict resolution?
All right.
Um, on any given
This
project.
this is really, really important for a spec writer. It's obviously important to the owners and the clients and the contractors and so forth. But as a spec writer, you keep this in the back of your mind all the time. It's also called a bit of a fear factor. So the article in the contract documents used in Canada, CCDC. Looking at CCDC2, and in that contract, it says if there's a conflict within the contract documents, the order of priority of documents from highest to lowest shall be the agreement between the owner, the definitions, supplementary conditions, the general conditions, and here's where we're getting to the spec, Division 01 of the specification, the technical specifications, material and finishing schedules, and lastly, the drawings. So every time you write something in a spec, it has priority over the drawings. And even the material finish has priorities over the drawings. So for example, if you say, we're going to put ceramic tile on this floor in your schedule on the drawings, but the schedule of materials says differently, that schedule of materials governs. And to make my point even more clear, say you're doing a 50-story high rise, and the drawings use a diagram to show double glazing, but the specifications say triple glazing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just one word, triple double. That's it. Between a massive, massive change order.
Yeah, that's an expensive word too, to go from double to
Right?
triple. It's an expensive
So
word.
yeah, and even commas can make a difference. So you really need to know your Oxford commas and things like that. But the key point here is that whatever you write in the specification governs over the drawings.
And
There's
that,
no other way around it.
I know us on this call and us and the viewers might understand that, but I think if you explain that to the general public, that'd be such an interesting thing to poll the general public on. Say, what would you think? Because in that list of items that you read off, drawings are the last thing, but the public perception is that it's just drawings, right? The
Yeah,
idea of even a book spec, I don't know if the public's even aware that there's a whole written document that goes along with the drawing set.
right. Well, and I have told people, they ask me what I do. I'm a specification writer and I'm an architect. And they go, what does a specification writer do? So I explain to them that the drawings show where things go, how
Mm-hmm.
big they are, where it's on the site and so forth. That has the dimensions on it, but the specification is really the quality document. That's the quality of the flooring that goes in, the quality of the installers that go in, if there's any additional third-party guarantees that are required in that. That all goes into the specification. Um, and then the light sort of goes on. Oh, we had somebody build our house and they didn't do it right. I said, did you
Yeah.
have the spec? What's that? So
Yeah, exactly. We get another great
It's
question.
yeah,
Oh,
don't mean to interrupt, but I think some of the people in on the call are commenting that, AIA contract documents are different and we should be very specific. We're looking at the Canadian standard forms of construction documents here, and we do have order order of priority or hierarchy of documents in those standard contracts in Canada. And what's interesting, because when I studied for my CDT with CSI in the US, I asked that question, and that was the longest discussion about hierarchy of documents I ever had. I thought it was very interesting that AIA documents try to level all of the documents issued for the contractor to be on an equal playing field.
Mm.
Which I think that interpretation probably makes more sense to me. I like having an order of precedence and documentation because I'm kind of that black and white type of person. But I know that design firms invest so much time in drawings. It's crazy for me to think that the specifications can often take precedence over what they spend so much time in practice working on
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
convey the design intent. So interesting concept, the way it's looked at between the US and Canada.
yeah.
So I have another question that came in
Mhm.
from Jim, and I love this question, and I can't wait to hear your response on this. So Jim is asking, have you ever included items in your spec to make sure that they're being read? Do you have little tests, little Easter eggs that you
Oh,
plug in there?
I've
Anything to?
sometimes I sometimes wanted to do that, but because you can do that in a review specification, but you don't want to do it in a contract document.
Okay.
It would be fun to, I mean, we joked about it that with one of my clients that in order to get the right marble countertops in the project, they had to send the architect to Italy with a team for a week to go through the various quarries and select the marble that would be best suited for the project. So we joked about that, but it obviously didn't make it in there. No, I don't put it in contract documents, but sometimes if you know, here's one. Um, in the hardware section, there's a product called sex bolts, and if they sometimes read the documents in the hardware, people go, "Is this misspelled?" They're actually called sex bolts, but I'm glad you read the spec.
Yeah. Well, that is so that's a um, yeah, whatever gets their attention, right? uh, uh, Jason, I know you were your grin got about this wide when that question came up. Do you have a story that you want to add?
Now, in a previous lifetime as an independent spec writer in the east coast of Canada, uh, you're bidding to the same pool of contractors a lot because the construction market's smaller, so you get to know people and you pick up rather quickly during the contract administration phase that some people, the contractor in particular, reads a spec and some people don't. So we had a one continuous offender that was always questioning, never reading the contract before he asked questions. And I put a bid out saying at the substantial performance inspection that they were to provide a dozen roses to our project manager, the client's project manager. So I showed up and I said, first thing on my deficiency list, where's the roses? So anyway, they got a laugh, but he never got the flowers.
We're getting the comments in here. Apparently, a case of beer seems to be the preferred
Bird.
method
I go with that.
of
Yeah.
of verification. And Jim saying only ever had one GC ask what type of beer. So not a lot of people were going through we're going through that. Um, and Corinne's adding to the conversation as well about the spec, saying that everything in the spec should be as important as anything else. No bold, no caps, no shouting. I I will share a personal story. For those of you who don't know, I am a licensed architect as well, and I have been asked before to prioritize something in the project, like bold this or highlight that. And I'm like, listen, if I took the time to write it or draw it, it's it's worthy of the same attention as anything else that's in this drawing set. So I just found that interesting. Like, okay, well, if I bold this, does that deprioritize if it's not bolded? So always, yeah, you get asked to do some interesting things there. Alex, you ever hear any weird requests when you're dealing with anybody's using SpecLink? Oh,
Like
no,
with
maybe
Easter
we're not
eggs
weird.
or
Or just like interesting questions, interesting uses that they want. Like, hey, does SpecLink do this? Or it kind of makes you pause and shake your head, like, well, why would you want to do
Hmm.
that for?
No, nothing that I can just think of off the top. I mean, I know, people will ask if they can import different types of documents in, but nothing sort of that would be comical per se. Um,
Marjorie, bless Marjorie. This is show's got some great comments here. Says I've done that in draft sets for our in-house redliners. In quotes, it says, "If you're reading this, redline it out." But we have a link to shut off internal comments like that. That's a really funny one. That's I might have to use that one. Jason, what are you thinking?
Kind of going through some of there was one in there that Kareen had mentioned about everything should be red, no bolding, no capitals, no
Right.
underlining. I agree with that concept. And I know her and I have had this conversation a couple of times. In Canada, I'll start by saying that in Canada, we generally uh, capitalize contract terms that are found in the definitions. So I think it gets in some people's craw a little bit that when we apply like the Chicago manual style to building out our master specifications, that we have capital letters on all of the words preceding a colon in an article. And that's not obviously done to draw any more attention to those words in the master spec, but that use of capitalization in SpecLink isn't willy-nilly. Like we do have some formatting standards and we do use the Chicago manual style, which does state that you capitalize the words in front of a colon. And I know that Korean changes some of that, if not all.
This is great. Our good friend and upcoming guest Eric Ledbetter just sent me a spec on perforated pastry units. So I think
there you
I
go.
think I haven't had lunch yet, but I think all this burger and pastry talk is leaving me a little bit on the hungry side. Um, so, question from Ron. David, I'll start with you. Jason, you could probably contribute to this one. Is leaving hardware aside, what are most arduous sections to write? Joint sealants, fire stopping, or painting? Would love your opinions on hardware too. So, as spec writers, what do you find as the most arduous sections to
Well,
write?
let's talk about sealants first. I think SpecLink has just about every kind of sealant you can imagine in the document, and it may take your stuff a while to actually work through them. However, when you really think about it on the project, there's not that many different types of sealants being used in the first place. So start by picking the sealants that you want to use, um, and insert those and put them in. If you use types, great. If you don't, that's fine too. The other note about sealants is if the contractor in a particular section you really think is going to do the sealants, then leave it out of the sealant section because they know best what they're going to use, especially in curtain wall and storefront and things like that. Now, I don't want to tell them what they do because part of their warranty is based on the quality of the materials they choose and the work that they do. Um, so that takes the arduousness, if there's a word, out of that section and simplifies it. Um, Millwork can be really, really exhausting sometimes, depending on the size of the project. For the hospital, I can't even begin to think. It was probably months of developing that along with the design team to get that right, because there was just so many different types of materials used, different types of hardware used, and so forth. So that was really arduous. Painting, not so much. Some of the easiest sections to write are like waterproofing and roofing. They're far easier than a millwork spec, for example. Fire stopping, not so much because there really is a full gamut of things in there, and you want to make sure that you have um, everything you need. What I don't do in a specification is call out specific products based on a type, because I really allow it kind of opens up the field for people who want to use different types of projects and innovative products and so forth that are all tested. As long as they're tested to a system, it's fine. Basically, what they're trying to do is protect that partition, and in doing so, they will select the best system for that use.
Another question just came in from Frank, and this is to David or Jason. So I'd love both of your opinions on it because it's another nuanced question. It comes in as, do David or Jason have any opinion on the legal definition of the word include and or including and the implications on and their implications on spec writing? So the include versus including.
I think they're including, when you say section includes, you're basically outlining a summary of things. It's not an exhaustive list of things that need to be done. So the part one, right at the beginning, is section includes. It's not meant to draw your attention to any one particular thing, because we get into that further down in the specification. So I don't think the problem with listing absolutely everything in part one is, then why do we have part two and part three? So really, section includes is a summary of what you can expect in the rest of the body of the spec that goes into more details. I hope that answered the question.
It may have. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at Frank's question there, and legal definition of include and or including. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't try to provide a legal definition. However, I've seen statements and specifications where somebody will say provide a watertight assembly, including all accessories and optional products required to make it that. If that's what you're talking about, I don't think that that's the type of specification that we strive to put out. If you want to include it, I think you should state it in the spec. There shouldn't be including but not limited to is not a term that I would use in the contract, in the specification at all. If you have
Agreed.
optional accessories that you want, let's get those in the specification. Otherwise, how's somebody going to bid that? You know, you have to tell them what you want, and anything that you leave out is going to be a change.
One of the things I learned in my specification course with Keith Robbins is a spec section really defines the work result. So if you're expecting a different result, then I don't know how to make that more clear, but you're really looking for a work result with that spec section. So if you're putting in a window in a wall, and the window section doesn't include every single little tiny item, then it doesn't matter. The point is, we want an effective window that meets these performances, and you might go into some installation requirements in part three. But remember, the spec section is the work result, and it doesn't have to list absolutely everything.
Yeah, Bridget's comment just came in here, and I like this one. Was we got rid of the old style shall be term and just state the instruction directly, right? Just do it. There's no need for the flowery language sometimes, right? Just state it.
I know.
And
when I teach the course, I go through the exercise of saying, okay, let's talk about the word any. We don't like that word in a specification, because to us, when we write it, we say fill any cracks in the wall. So the contractor is going, oh, I get to choose.
Yeah.
So stay away from that word.
It's good pointer. We're gonna jump in. We have one more poll that I want to ask. As we're kind of getting close to the end, we got about 10 minutes left here. So quickly, we're always looking for new guests to have on. I know I'm having a side chat here with somebody about a civil engineer and maybe having some engineering guests on. So we got a bunch of introverts in the crowd. the no bar just shot up to like an infinite amount, like right at the end. Um, if there's a particular topic or a guest that you'd want to recommend, by all means, send me a note in the chat or let me know what you're thinking that way. I'm just going to end this one real quick to know just how many people we've got here that are enjoying watching somebody else be the guest, but definitely not want to be the guest. Steve's asking, he's saying, aren't all spec writers introverts? I know a couple that aren't. I don't know.
Green's not.
As spec writer, Korean, that's obvious. Korean's going to be. We're going to have Korean on at some point this year, and yeah, she'll break that mold of introverted spec writer. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a couple people. If you guys want to drop a note in the chat here about who could be a future guest or a topic that you're interested in, aren't all spec writers introvert? Do we have any non-introvert spec writers on here? I'd be curious to see who the extroverts are in the crowd. Amy Baker's the hand goes right up.
You need to
Yeah,
Yeah,
do a poll
I think
question,
spec
Dory.
writers are generally introverts until you have a big room full of spec writers, and then it's no holds barred after that.
I learned that really fast at the CSI conference in Houston last year. I was expecting to walk into a library setting, and it turns out to be, I mean, I don't use the words frat party loosely, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that. No, it was I was pleasantly surprised by the energy of the room. I'll say that. So, um, Jason, any other questions you want to tackle today? I know we've got an update for Canada would be fantastic. Dorothea wants a little more info up here. We're going to be actually Jason
Yeah,
and I
we
are
were
going to be
talking
in
about.
Vancouver. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking. I was talking with Dorothea in the chat about reference standards and how we update them. And there's one of my colleagues is in the group chat, Cliff Marvin's with RIB, and we have this discussion all the time about how do you stay on top of the changes in reference standards. And it seems, 10 years ago, a reference standard, or maybe not even that long ago, it wouldn't get updated for 3 or 4 years. And like Canadian Standards Association try to get things on a 5-year cycle, but now
Hmm.
they update them so quickly that, an ASTM standard could be reissued with minor changes that don't really affect the work result, but they change it, they change the date on it, and staying on top of those is very difficult. Now, Dorothy had asked, how do we prioritize which ones we update? And, I don't like to think that we have a priority order, but when the scope of the reference standard changes, the content of the master spec, Corrine brought this to my attention not long ago, is the new types and the ASTM standards for ceiling tiles. Um, that affects the way our spec's written. So those are the ones that we work on initially, if we can get to those ones, but we still have to identify them. So,
Yeah.
we have a service provider that works with us to identify what's changed, and then we got to dive into the reference standard to find out how it's changed. So it's quite a process.
Thank you for sharing that, Jason. I know it's um, there's a lot of nuances to a lot of things behind the scenes that can happen. As if anybody was here early today saw that we accidentally jumped, started the broadcast a little bit early today, so you got to see us testing our microphones and lighting. Um, that was bonus features. I think that'll show up in the bonus features of the DVD or Blu-ray if I'm not dating myself too much. Um,
That was my bad.
um, no, 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 no. You're a guest. You get to blame everybody else today. We'll blame you tomorrow, but right now the
Okay.
spotlight's
All
yours.
right.
It's all
All right.
you can have it. No, we're not going to throw you under the bus like that. I think now is a good time to start landing our webinar for today. David, honestly, this is such a fun conversation. I know when we were having our pre-chats, I was so excited for today because you deliver such beautiful and eloquent answers, and it's no doubt that same thought process would transfer over into your spec writing. If anybody wanted to get a hold of you and needed some help with their spec writing
Yes.
adventures,
Yeah.
what's the best way? When would you invite people to reach out to you, and what's the best way for them to reach out to you besides your website that I've got on an upcoming slide?
At any time. The website's good. Just shoot me an email, even if you have a question that you think I could answer. By all means, I'm open to looking at all kinds of avenues for people to reach out. One of the things that we've started with CSC, if you're a CSC member, is the mentorship program, and it's fantastic. It allows you to, as a mentee, find a mentor, and if you want to get more information from somebody who's been at this business for a few years and so forth, that's a good way to get involved, and find out, who works with you. I think I want to stress here before we go is that you can't write specifications in a silo. You know, reach out to other specification writers, whether they're in a
Mhm.
firm or not. Build your network of specification writers, and we do that. Karine, myself, and a few others in the industry, especially here in Alberta, are connected. In fact, I have them as my spec team. When I write an email, I need a question answered, or they can perhaps advise me with a particular product that they've used before and give me some tips and tools. So don't write in a silo. Reach out to people who are other spec writers.
That's excellent advice. And yeah, I do. Some of the spec writers that I know in my circle also have that same setup with a trusted
Yeah,
group of colleagues. And as spec writers, I'll say you're an intelligent bunch, but you're also a generous group. So um, that's a nice detail to share. That's not something that every profession can say, David. So
no, we
we'll
like sharing knowledge.
yeah, I wouldn't fancy myself a spec writer. I can't make that cut, you know. But
Right.
we let me fell behind in my slides here. There we go. If anybody wants to talk about SpecLink training, you can always reach out to David, or we have our internal SpecLink training as well. If you were interested in a SpecTalk, being a guest, we'd love to hear from you. I know we took the poll already, and it was not the most popular question that I've ever asked, but it is still available to you. And we do have a note of who said that they would be interested. So there's David's website up at the top there, specs4architects.ca. David can help you on both sides of the border with your spec writing. So don't be shy to reach out. You can see what a knowledgeable and stand-up guy he is. Our next Spec Talk is going to be Wednesday, March 5th, where our guest panelist is going to be Holly Jordan. We always love having Holly back. And the next episode is going to be, we've titled it Big Buildings, Bigger Specs. So we're going to be revolving the conversation around large scale projects. So things that might have square footages that aren't your everyday projects, or may have interesting requirements because they occupy just so much volume. So there's going to be some interesting conversation to be had around that. So again, thank you everybody for attending today. Very grateful that you guys take your time, probably out of your lunch hours, is my guess, to be with us today. But otherwise, another wonderful episode. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jason, for coming in. Alex, I couldn't do this without you, man. It's always awesome.
My pleasure.
My
And
pleasure. If
yeah,
anybody's
guys.
going to be in Vancouver, Lower Mainland Vancouver of British Columbia next week, Dory and I will be at BuildX Vancouver. Love to
Yeah,
see
Yeah,
you.
wearing these t-shirts. So yeah, if anybody's going to be at Buildex Vancouver next week, shoot us a message, drop by, come say hi. Bring us a bag of chips or a hamburger maybe, because now David's got me all
Yes.
hungry about. All right,
yeah.
guys, have
There's
the.
the CSC conference in May,
We'll be there too. We're
in
going to hype
St.
that one when the
John's too.
time's
So
right too. Yeah, Jason
yeah.
and
All
I,
right.
we are on the hype ship here. Everybody's going to know
All right.
everything about where we are.
Good
So
to know.
have excellent. Have an awesome day, everybody, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.